The choreography isn't necessarily created in my head when I come into the studio, or better said, before I come into the studio, but of course I have an overriding idea about the piece. What I do have planned out in my head before coming into the studio is a kind of map of the choreography. This is a pas de deux, this is another pas de deux, this is a solo, this is a trio, this is a group. More or less, those ideas are all mapped out in my head. Of course, the beauty of it being a creation is that those things can change in the process. You can discover, in fact, oh, this was perfect music for a pas de deux, and then all of a sudden you realize, no, it works much better as a group, and the pas de deux will come after to this particular section of the music. I do really enjoy choreographing on the spot. So that means I don't really have particular steps in mind when I come into the studio. I love to find that on my own body in the studio and then somehow observe and coach how I can translate those movements into the dancers' bodies that I'm working with. I mean, that's a really, really interesting idea. In that sense, dancers' input is very important because sometimes I really need to bend the dancers to my will, so to speak, in the way that you might train a racehorse, which is not a great analogy, but sometimes you need to do that. And then other times, and the majority of the time, there's a much more flexible dynamic between choreographer and dancer, where they are sharing their creative input and perhaps suggesting things that might even be better than what I had originally had in mind. So that's another beautiful thing about creation. It really becomes a collaborative effort. The style I work in sometimes is very difficult to categorize because yes, it's ballet and I'm working with classical dancers and I love what a classically trained body does. The knowledge that a classically trained body has instinctively, and I love working with that knowledge, but I like to bend it to my own creative impulses, which is essentially a much more contemporary kind of aesthetic, and to find the expressiveness in a contemporary language. But it's funny because I think classical dancers or classical companies see it as contemporary, but somehow other schools of contemporary dance see it as quite classical. So I'm sort of stuck somewhere in the middle, and I like it, but I think sometimes it's a little hard to define.